Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up with me, Kedar, the Tiger Writes, and I, the Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing Chapter 28. Tibs waited among the Omegas. He could tell apart those who had been on runs from the new arrivals by how they were already clustered in groups of five instead of waiting nervously, waiting for what came next. He'd cautiously walk to the stalls to see what they saw, ready to back away the moment Stowe spoke to him, or if he heard, or if he heard, or if he heard the dungeon's commentary on the team inside, but neither happened. Ah, yeah, I need to on the team inside, but neither happened. Stowe would be focused on them, and he had to speak Tibs for him to hear Stowe's voice. The offerings were better than what the guild ended to the Omegas, but nothing of the quality the merchant in town sold. They were also cheaper. A handful of copper would get someone a piece of armor that could last them until they could reliably reach the first floor boss room. It was that handful that was proving to be a problem for the merchants. Split between five people, the first floor gave little in the way of coins, and from what Tibbs had observed, the team members didn't trust each other enough to pool their coins for one of them to afford the armor. They also died too easily for those merchants to offer that the armor be paid off from future runs. Tibbs waited for the team to exit. It was Fedora's first run with her element, and he had wanted to hear how it had gone, what realization she'd made that her teacher hadn't even mentioned. He wanted to share in her excitement. The team exited, and Dread built in teams. In Tibs, only three of them, one being carried. The fighter and team leader and the sorcerer. Yeah, this comes across as three people when I mean two, because the fighter is the team leader. The fighter who led the team. Only three. Okay, and yeah, okay, we'll go through them. One of them carried, so you know what? Only three of them. The fighter who led the team and the sorcerer carried. The third member. Tibs couldn't make out who that was. Who that was until the clerk healed them and the team's second fighter could stand. No. She had her element. She couldn't. He looked at the door again, wishing for her to have been delayed. Thought about stepping forward within Stowe's range and asking what had happened. But Stowe would tell him. Stowe loved regaling Tibs with other teams' misadventure. And while he no longer talked about who and how they died, if Tibs asked, no. He watched them step down and head to the guild stable, noting what they carried. Cheap armor. Okay. He watched them step down and head to the guild stable, noting what they carried. The cheap armor they dropped on the table. The fighter walked away, and the defeat in his eyes as he saw Tibs running. No, not again. He shoved through the crowd, fighting the tears. Why? Why had he done this again? He knew Omegas didn't live, so why had he helped her, gotten to know her? Hadn't he learned his lesson? He couldn't get attached to anyone outside his team because any of them could die. Jeff was proof of that. It had been a warning of what awaited him with Fedora. No, the rogue had been training. He couldn't think of her as a person. The rogue. Okay. Then what would happen to Fedora? No, the rogue he'd been training. He couldn't think of her as a person. He couldn't think of them beyond being Omegas. It hurt too much. The pained cry escaped his lip as his leg locked up. He was eating dirt, not caring until he noticed the laughter. He looked up as it spread, wondering who would laugh at him. Who would laugh at anyone for tripping, for being in pain? It was dawn. Oh, of course it was him. He was bent over with laughter, and so was his team. And with the four of them, Ratcliffe was absent, Tibbs noted. Laughing along, it was enough to get the crowd going. Oh, look at him, the sorcerer said as he tried to catch his breath. The great savior of the dungeon can't even stand on his feet. He's crying because he fell. He was laughing again. Recognition caused some of the town folks to stop laughing, but not many of them. And Tibbs considered throwing a knife at the sorcerer, his air knife, to ensure he didn't miss. But one of his teammates would jump in front and take the hit for Don. Then Don would be mocking him even louder. He tried to stand to show Don he wasn't weak, that he could endure pain, but the corruption sided with the sorcerers. That he could endure that he could endure pain, but the corruption sided with the sorcerer. Oh, increasing the pain until the cry escaped against his will. And Tib. Okay. Oh, so let's. Pain increased. That's a lot of that. That's part of what happened. And this is a draft one, so I don't care as I'm writing it. I'm just writing. But there's a lot of clunkiness that will seep in because the mind will flip stuff. The mind will mentally fix problems that I write. This is where reading out loud is a tool that is very helpful to me because I can hear the clunkiness many times. The pain increased until the cry escaped against his will, and Tibbs hadn't made it past being on all four. I believe that's it, all fours. The laughter increased. Everyone joined in with saying to Tibbs. Everyone who still had a town to live in, or runners to provide them with coins, because he had saved Stowe, was laughing at him. He was going to make them pay. Have you no shame? A woman demanded. Then a hand took his arm and helped him stand. Do you not recognize light fingers? He saved this town, and this is how you repay him? Laugh at his pain? Please, there was one person in this forsaken town who was on his side, even if it meant enduring his nickname again. He blinked and focused on the pain and tears and wished he hadn't. Should have known. This day was simply going to be the worst day for him. It wasn't the dress that gave her away. By itself, he could have thought she was a successful merchant, since it wasn't the large and far too decorated thing of Aigmore. It wasn't even the jewels on her, too many of them for the common folk. Again, a successful merchant with not particularly good taste could wear those. It was the look she gave these several people, those laughing at him. The look that told them just how superior she was to each and every one of them, because she, at least, knew who he was. She had the good sense not to laugh, because she was bred from better stock than them. Fucking Noble had just come to his defense. This day was simply the worst day ever. He wrenched his arm out of her hand. Don't need your help. He snapped and wished he could move away, but any weight on his corrupted leg caused the pain to shut up. I am helping you, she said haughtily. You should appreciate that I at least know who you are. Don't, he growled. Don't help. I'm not a thing for you to use to make you feel better than the rest of us. Like being on good terms with the guild wasn't trouble enough. Now Dunn was going to spread stories of how Tibs was friends with the nobles. Well, I say, she replied, go say it elsewhere. I don't need you here. This is our town. She looked at him as if she'd realized she was next to a slug. Then she snorted. They're indeed all the same. She turned with a huff and through the parting crowd. Oh, that's gotta hurt, Don said, snickering. The hero has just had a fight with his woman. She isn't my girl. Tibbs yelled. The crowd had thinned, but those who stayed were now laughing at the sorcerer. Oh, I know what I saw, Don replied between bouts of laughter. I knew you had the aspiration of greatness, but I didn't think you'd lower yourself to offering your body to one of them. The disgust was so strong, it could be comical, and the crowd thought it was. Tibbs took a step forward, and at least this time he didn't scream as pain exploded in his leg and he fell. The sorcerer's laughter laughed harder as Tib looked up and glared at him through tears-filled eyes. Tibbs hated the sorcerer almost as much as he hated corruption. He stoked the hate. It was better than feeling the loss. His leg was still painful hours later, but he could endure it now. It hadn't been this long-lasting since his early days out of the sickbed. He hated that noble too. What had she been doing there? Out of their part of the town. Out of their part of the town. There had been nothing to attract nobles, had there? Yeah, he tried to remember where he had been, but thinking about that brought back why he'd been running away, and he focused on his hate and anger again. Ball. He always made things worse. Settle down, Tibbs, Jekyll said. You aren't. Tibbs glared at the fighter, who raised his hand in defeat from his bed. What was he even doing here, in their room? He should be with Krosev doing them things. Tibbs wanted to be angry, alone, without distraction. Fine, keep pacing. Stay angry. Jekyll stretched back, hand behind his head. But instead, you should do something about it. Break into Dawn's room. Steal. Steal. Steal his coins. Put Dawn on his bed. It'll make you feel better than pacing. Do something? Tibbs snapped. Shouldn't have told the fighter why he was angry, but Jekyll had been there when Tibbs slammed the door. And have the corruption hurt me at the worst moment? He probably did this to him. He's corruption, after all, Tibbs grumbled. Did he? Jekyll lost all amusement, looking ready to take on, well, Dawn's team. Tibbs thought about saying yes. Jekyll would make the sorcerer pay and not care about the consequences. He was that kind of friend. So Tibbs had to care about them for him. And even as angry as he was, he didn't want Jekyll to end up in the cells and miss their next run. The chance at loot. No, he sighed. I'd have felt the essence come at me. Would have been obvious. He dropped onto his bed and winced as his bad leg bent painfully. Everyone laughed at Jekyll. They're idiots, Jekyll said, no longer ready for battle. But not back to the jokester attitude either. Next time the dungeon's about to die, you let it happen. That'll teach them a lesson. He frowned. No, never mind. I don't want the dungeon to die. Tibbs had to fight hard not to smile. You'd miss the loot. Well, yeah. He smiled at Tibbs, then grew serious. But the dungeon's your friend. You don't let a friend die, no matter what. Even if that friend had killed someone you knew, he swallowed. The pain fighting to resurface, and he couldn't muster anger at Stowe. He knew Stowe hadn't set out to kill Fedora. He tested her, and she'd failed. He looked out the window by his bed. The clouds were dark red with the setting sun. Soon would be when he'd run the roof if he didn't have to worry about what the corruption did to him. It was how he liked to deal with his pain. Run up there, scream sometimes. Now he was stuck down here with the rest of them. Just so fucking tired, he said, looking away. Of people thinking I'm some hero. Of Dawn thinking I'm against him. Of the corruption hurting me at the right moment to make everything worse. I know, Tickle said simply. I'm sorry for dumping this on you. I'm just... Tibbs clenched his teeth in frustration. Or something other than complain or pace. Tibbs got out of his armor, pausing any time laughter came through the window. They weren't laughing at him, he reminded himself. Maybe they were. Dawn would make sure no one forgot what had happened. He'd probably tell everyone what room Tibbs was in, so they knew what open window to look out for. Tibbs could do nothing to stop the sorcerer. Clenched his teeth at the pain as he took the legs off. Jekyll didn't offer to help, and Tibbs was grateful. Then peeled off the sweaty underclothes, mulling things over. Jekyll was right that he should do something about what was happening. He opened the chest with his stuff, and his dark clothes were on top. And still had them cleaned to flip through them for something older. He couldn't do anything about Dawn, anything that wouldn't end up causing more trouble after. But he could do something. He put on the old set. It wasn't as dark as the one he used to run the roof or move unnoticed in the alley, but it would do. It was time for him to confront the root of this particular set of problems. He had to take an indirect route. It was still early enough that even with the sun set, there were a lot of people about. He didn't want to deal with people. Not those who might laugh, and especially. They wouldn't know where he was going. He was already close enough to just run and then deal with the questions afterward. So no, no guards, no bothering with lying to anyone. Just deal with this once and for all. The smell caused him to falter. He turned back before, but not this time. It wasn't keeping him away this time. That was why the smell made him sick. Made him want to be anywhere but here. It wasn't him. It wanted. Wow. I keep flipping. I don't know why. I don't know what it is about wanted and wanted, because they don't look that similar, and the letters on the keyboard aren't that close to each other. But it's a flip. I'll often put wanted when I mean wasn't, and I'll put wasn't when I mean wanted. We got a bunch of words like that. I keep flipping, and because those two are legal, I can't do an auto correction. It wanted him to suffer to continue. It enjoyed this game of him never knowing when it would strike again, causing him to fall off a roof and die, or worse, trip in the street and be mocked on a trip in a street and be mocked on a day when he should have been able to mourn in peace. No more. It was time it learned that Tibs wasn't someone it wanted to mess with. It was going to fucking kick corruption in the balls. He skirted the area until he located an alley going straight to the part of Merchant Row. When the stench increased, Tibs picked up speed to show he wouldn't be deterred this time. When it got bad enough his stomach tried to empty itself, he swallowed the bile with a snarl and pushed himself. He ignored the throbbing in his leg. The corruption still there, mixing with the exhaustion. He crossed the street, fighting the urge to slow down, the voice telling him to reconsider what he was about to do, probably corruption seeping into his mind, that there had to be a better way. He was fast enough that even if all he did was hit the low stone wall, he'd tip over it and fall in. So he placed his hand on top and propelled himself over it. There was no turning back now. He looked down at the approaching darkness. It should be purple, dark purple, but it didn't have any color in the faint light of Clarion. Oh fuck. He couldn't turn back anymore. What had he been thinking? This was stupid beyond even something Jackal would do. He took a breath of fainted air and turned so his back would hit instead of his face and braced himself. The impact didn't splash. The corrupt liquid clung to him, viscous, burning with cold fire that made him want to scream. How long? How long did he have to endure? He thought the pain he'd felt each time the corruption in his essence acted up had been bad, but it was but a shadow of this. When would it end? Once he died? Well, come, someone greeted enthusiastically. Tibs fought the urge to open his eyes and look at the speaker. That would just let more corruption eat at him, and he was already in... Where was the pain? He opened an eye a little. Yeah, you know what? Cracked. Cracked an eye open. Everything was dark and moved. Everything was dark and moved as if it wasn't quite solid. Dark purple. The color of the pool of corruption. Tibs was seated at a table, and opposite him was someone with features so fine he couldn't tell if they were a man or a woman. Their smile was radiant. I'm sorry for the pain you had to feel getting here, rules and all that. They rolled their eyes. The motion was odd, as they were entirely made of the same dark purple. Even the voice was indistinct either. Wasn't distinct. I never got why the others are so strict about sticking to them. I mean, if one of you wanted to meet with one of us, why not just let it happen, right? They placed their elbow on the table, the surface of which wobbled slightly, then rested their chin on their hand, which also wobbled. It's such a delight to finally meet you, Tibs. Tibs startled. None of the elements had addressed him by name before. I hope you don't mind me using your name. They looked worried that they'd offended him. I'm not big on the title and formal stuff. They smiled. I mean, we're going to be working together. But that's why you're here. They offered him a hand, and over the open palm, a shadow of an element floated there, offered to Tibs. Just like that? Tibs asked, eyeing it suspiciously. Of course. Why would I? They shook their head in annoyance. Let me guess. The others made you work for it. Of course they did. I don't get it. What's the point? You already suffered getting to them, and once there, you have to what? Prove you're good enough to deserve what you sought? Someone like you deserves, or someone like you comes around in what? Like it comes around once in they found. How many of your lifetimes has it been since the last one? They shrugged, busy trying to figure out what the game was. They didn't believe they were just handing it over. Right, sorry. Time's a human thing. Well, an out there thing. Everything there feels it. Here we have rules, and that's about it. Tibs nodded. Don't those rules say you have to make me earn this? He pointed to the shadow over the proffered hand. They smiled and lowered their voice conspiratorially, as if someone might overhear them. Maybe there was. If there were rules, there had to be someone who enforced them. I'm going to let you in on a little secret, they whispered. I'm like you, something of a rule breaker. You've made it here. You've proven yourself to me enough to me. Listening you again is just redundant. I don't know that word. What word? They asked in surprise. Redundant? Tibs repeated carefully. Are you sure? Tibs nodded. Well, that's interesting. I plucked it out of there. They tapped Tibs' forehead. I'm plucking all the words I'm using from there. No other way to communicate. He looked at him. I guess that technically, they grinned as Tib narrows his eyes. There are so many, not some, but so many words in there, you might not realize what they all are. He rubbed his temple as he tried to work out what corruption meant. You're starting to sound like Alistair when he wants me to realize something. Sorry, you doing lesson is definitely not something I intend for you to do. The others can take care of that. All I'm here for is to offer you what you want, and in return, remember that I didn't make you work for it. I'm here to make things easier for you. That's all. If we work together, it's all going to be much easier. They smiled. You get me? Tibs kept his eyes on that face as he reached for the shadow. He'd finally realized what they reminded him of. The con men and women of his street. The sweet talkers who convince you to hand over that last crumb of bread whilst having you believe you'd get a whole loaf out of the encounter. The expression didn't change. They didn't pull their hands away at the last moment. When Tibs touched the shadow, it melted into his fingers. The core of his essence expanded, making space for the element among the others. For the new wizard among the others. They smiled. See, not everything needs to be a chore. You can tell the others I treated you with the proper respect you deserve when you go see them. Tibs nodded, studying the feel of the essence, now that it was part of him. As with the others, he couldn't find the right way to describe it. The closest he came to surprised him because there was nothing sticky about it. It was simply sticky. Now what? He asked, expecting the line to be pulled. Now that he'd taken the bait. Now you go back, he answered. As much as I enjoy your company, you belong out there. Wait, he swallowed. If you send me back where I was in the pool, his voice faltered and was weak when he uttered the word. It hurts. They looked at him, surprised. Tibs, I would never hurt you now that we're friends. You're special. Remember that. If one of them hurts you after you took part of them into you, well, I don't think highly of them, and neither should you. Tibs broke the surface with a gasp and scrambled not to be pulled back under the viscous liquid, then stopped when he realized he was sitting on the bottom, and the liquid only went to his shoulders. He was certain that he'd held his breath. Wait, what? He was certain that as he'd held his breath, he'd been dragged under much deeper for reaching corruption. The way the man who'd fallen into it crashed about when they had jumped out of the Cavern Garden building had led him to think it was bottomless. He stood, and all but below the middle of his thigh was exposed to the cool air, and the breeze made his private part shrivel. He dropped. Fuck, he was naked. The corruption had eaten his clothing. He looked around. Now would be when Dawn was here to gaze onto his element. He would never let Tibs live this down. Tibs looked down at what he was sitting in. Maybe he should have done see him right now. See just how superior the sorcerer felt. Maybe he'd want to prove he was the better at step into the liquid. Tibs shook himself. Don didn't deserve this, no matter how angry Tibs was at him. Tibs certainly wasn't one to gloat, even if now was the time for it. No, now was the time to head back to his room without anyone seeing him. He wouldn't. That wouldn't be easy. He could hear people in the distance. He looked up to locate Claria. Not a lot of time had passed during his audience. He saw the roofs as he considered his option and reflexively flexed his leg. There was no pain. He smiled. Without the corruption getting in his way, he knew exactly how to go back to his room without being seen. And this concludes chapter 28 of Stepping Up. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next one's going to be, subscribe and hit the bell. Share it with your friends. They might enjoy this too. If you want to read the whole story, if you want to read the story, at this point it may be ahead, you can do that on Royal Road. It's for free. If you want to support me and read further ahead, that's for sure. It's available on my Patreon. And if you want to catch me fumbling my way through these live, I do that on Twitch every Tuesday morning. The links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.